Here are 4 signs that we knew God wanted us to be together.
Number 1 is that we both lined up with the biblical standard for what God says a husband and a wife should be. When it comes to looking inside the Bible for what a wife should be or what a husband should be, people always talk about Proverbs 31, Ephesians 5, and we talk about those verses a lot. But I know a big one for me when I was thinking about Naomi, looking at her, thinking, is this a godly woman that I would want to one day be my wife? A verse that would come to me is 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 3, which says, do not let your adorning, this is talking about women, do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and a quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. So just very short, whenever I see Naomi, I just knew it was something different about her. There was something, your spirit was just, it was evident. It was a quiet and peaceful spirit. And ultimately, that's what attracted me to you.
1 John chapter 4, verse 1, which says, dear friends, do not believe everyone who claims to speak by the Spirit. You must test them to see if the spirit that they have comes from God. When I started dating Eddie and was trying to figure out whether or not this was going to be anything or should be anything, I was really trying to test and discern who he was on the inside. And so I know for me, that was like asking him a lot of questions, asking him deep questions, but also like really listening to his answers. Like, it's one thing to ask the questions, but really listening and discerning his answers to see who he was on the inside and if that matched who he said he was on the outside. Number 2 is confirmation of answered prayers.
One of my favorite verses, Psalm chapter 37, verse 4, says that when a man delights himself in the Lord, that God will give him the desires of his heart. And I know for me, when I was in the stage where I was noticing you and I'm like, man, it was just something different about you. And for me, I really wanted to make sure that it wasn't just my ambition to make her be attracted to me or even my flesh because she's beautiful. But thinking on this verse, I really realized that the more time I would spend with God in prayer and seeking his face, the more I would notice the increased desire to want to pursue you. So for me, spending time in God's presence and noticing that desire increase is what confirmed that God was calling me to pursue you.
Originally, for me, I had desires or traits of a husband that I was looking for and all these things, but then when Eddie came, just because it came in a different time than I was expecting, or maybe who he was as a person was different than I was expecting, I really had to spend time with the Lord, like asking him questions and also reevaluating the things that I desired, right? Like, I thought that I was going to meet a man in medical school. And so when Eddie came along, I'm like, oh, he has a lot of great qualities, but the timing's off. So for me, it was more so really evaluating my desires, but then more than anything, like letting the Lord's desire become my desires so that I was trusting and hoping for the right things.
Sign number 3 is godly counsel.
So the Bible says in Proverbs chapter 19, verses 20 to 21, listen to advice and accept instruction, that you may gain wisdom in the future. Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. Similarly to the last point, when I said that I had my own plan and my own way, a lot of the ways in which I was allowing God to help me understand better was through other people. Specifically, my mom. We talked about godly counsel. We've talked about
Thank you.
We've talked about godly counsel before in a number of our videos, but it doesn't just have to be a parent. It doesn't even have to necessarily be somebody older than you, although that can help. But godly counsel is somebody who has the mind and the heart of Christ, right? Who can speak into your situation maybe in a way you can't see. So for me, it was my mom who was like, I don't know, this Eddie guy, he has a lot of good qualities, or he has things. Why don't you ask him about his intentions? And that led to honestly where we are now, because I was ready to be like, this is not it. This is not the plan that I thought that I had. But ultimately, through godly counsel, that helped me to reshape my desires and get into alignment with God's plan for me.
And I think for myself, it could have been very easy to be blindsided and just say, yeah, I want this woman. I want Naomi. But yeah, I was still being receptive to hear maybe there were some perspectives that I was missing because I was so focused on pursuing her. But I do know, even having confirmation from my own godly counsel, just thinking back to that, specifically my grandma, who I think I just sent a picture of you to her and just kind of expressed some of what I felt about you. And she was like, yeah, that's her. Go after her. And now here we are.
Go grandma.
Shout out grandma.
Point number 4 is peace.
Psalm chapter 37, verse 37 says, mark the perfect man and behold the upright, for the end of his way is peace.
Ultimately, in the first stages of this relationship, while there were things that I was nervous about, or you have like those giddy stages, right? Like ultimately in those moments, even when I was unsure of things, I always had peace.
And ultimately, we knew that God's hand was on the relationship because of the peace that we had concerning the relationship, both back then and to this day.